You watched this game. I had this on the second screen. And when it was 2-1, I said to my dad, look, this is Nick Kovac ball. He's just going to lull them, Copenhagen, into such boredom and then make it 2 or 3-1 and then 4-1. That's going to be similar to the Athletic Bilbao game. It wasn't quite. There was a late Copenhagen goal, but, it seemed like another 3 points that only were briefly threatened by Copenhagen.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. And actually, I think I hadn't really thought about it until you mentioned it there, but there was quite a lot of similarities to the Bilbao game in the sense that, Dortmund kind of looked in control for most of that game. Bilbao scored. There's a real wobble for about 10 minutes after that goal. But then, crucially, Dortmund kind of get back on top of things, and that's kind of what we've been seeing for much of the season. And actually, even you can even throw their Klassiker in there, and the way that Dortmund finished that game so strongly, and saying it's something we're beginning to notice a lot of this Dortmund team. They do finish games very strongly. But yeah, I thought it was a really professional performance for the most part. As I said, aside from the poor Yusuf Moukoko, thought he'd kind of had his dreams answered by scoring a goal against his old team, and then Anton ends up getting it for own goal, which I think is correct because for anyone who missed the game, Moukoko completely unmarked from the corner, hits a shot, Kobel saves it, and then the save ricochets off Anton and bounces back into the net. So it was technically an own goal. That's unfortunately for Moukoko. Besides that, Copenhagen did have some chances before half time. They probably started the second half a little stronger. I've said in our subscriber chat that prior to Dortmund getting that penalty in the 61st minute, they were kind of sleepwalking a little bit in the second half. But I think we just kind of saw a game where kind of individual talent really kind of stood out. I think you can kind of look across that team, and I think a lot of people were good. I thought, there's one player in particular that stood out, but just in general, I thought Brandt was okay. I thought Svensson looked good. Kuta looked good. I thought Bellingham looked strong. Girassi, even though he didn't get on the score sheet, was very useful up front. He basically set up Nmecha's first goal. But yeah, undoubtedly the key man here, Manu, was Felix Nmecha. And we were joking, or I made the joke in our subscriber chat that it's wild that Dortmund signed Joe Bellingham when they already had the Jude Bellingham replacement in Felix Nmecha. And people forget, but he was literally signed with the money that they got from selling Bellingham, so you couldn't make a more direct comparison at the time. Didn't really quite work out for him at first, and things kind of fell away. He became a bit of a squad player. There were concerns about what's going to happen to him going forward. But since Kovac has came in, he's been fantastic. He's been fantastic since the start of the year. And in this game, he was outstanding. And maybe it's a lazy comparison, but he did kind of give very strong Bellingham vibes. He bossed that midfield physically. His second goal in particular is worth looking up, where he's holding off a Copenhagen marker when he basically runs with the ball and shoots. And that gives off to me very strong Bellingham vibes because he's obviously such a physical player as well as a technically gifted player. And I just think he's kind of going from strength to strength, Manu. We spoke to him after the game against St. Pauli at the start of the season in the mix zone, and I actually asked him, what position do you actually play now? Because it's hard to kind of nail down what he's good at, because it's between him, Sabitzer, Bellingham, and some other midfielders in that team, Chukwuemeka, I suppose, to an extent. And he says, from week to week, Kovac completely changes our role. He changes what he asks of us. I thought it was quite telling, actually, that right after his first goal, there was a stoppage and he came over some water, and Kovac was screaming in his face about some tactical instructions and the fact that Nmecha clearly wasn't doing what you're supposed to be doing on the pitch. But he's obviously a player that Kovac trusts. He's a player who Kovac thinks he can do what he asks him to do on the pitch. And, I got to say, Manu, maybe it's just kind of, biased because I've just literally watched them there. But if I'm rattling my brain for which players have probably thrived the most at Dortmund since Kovac came in, I would say Nmecha's definitely up there.
Yeah, maybe Benzebaini, who scores as well, right? From the penalty spot again. Yeah, no, it's very impressive. We were going through the top 5 teams in the Champions League while we were watching, and the top 5 is PSG, Inter, Arsenal, and Man City. And while Dortmund have scored 12 goals, they have also conceded 7. Which is the second most goals scored and the most goals conceded. But I mean, the thing is, the truth of the matter is too that 4 of those goals came in this really wild game against Juventus, right?
Hmm.
And you subtract that, they'd probably be on 9 points, should be on 9 points now.
Yeah.
The
It's worth saying,
average,
Manu, it's worth saying both the goals they conceded today were really amateur. Like the
yeah.
first one, Mukuku's completely unmarked in the box, and the second one, I think Anselmino gets caught under the ball, and Dadison, who's
And I
like,
think Kobel has a hand on it, and
yeah,
it's the referee watch that goes off, right? Because it was so tight.
yeah, it goes over the line, and Kobel kind of smacks it out of the
Yeah.
ball, out of the pitch, but obviously, or out of the net, but it definitely was a goal. But both pretty poor defending, I'd say, for both
But
goals.
it's what happened in the Klassiker too. It's the second goal that was scored by Bayern. The Olise goal was, they still have these moments of madness at times that cost them crucial points. Didn't today, didn't against Bilbao, but against Bilbao there was that moment too where Svensson makes that unbelievable tackle to rescue them, right? And then they would
Yep.
go on and win 4-1. But like they still have these Nuri Sahin-esque lapses in defense that Kovac is obviously working on eliminating, but it's still not 100% out. And I mean, ahead of the Klassiker said, like, we're not going to eliminate a 25-point gap to Bayern Munich in a single season. It's just not possible, right? But you can see the progress that was made, but you can also at the same time see where this team still has obvious flaws and why they're defensively so good. It's actually kind of weird because I think actually they're defensively really good, and one of the soundest teams in the Bundesliga. But then they have these really short periods of blackouts where you're like, oh, you just ruined 89 minutes of fantastic defensive football by like 2 seconds where two guys didn't think.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I'd say the tactics are working very well for them. I'd say the system's working very, very well for them. I think even on like a mental or psychological point of view, as you mentioned about the Bilbao game and this one as well,
Mm.
and arguably even the Bayern game, they don't kind of they don't they're not like rabbits caught in the headlight anymore when they do
Yep.
concede goals, which was always a problem with the Nuri Sahin team. Dortmund just looked like they were waiting to capitulate when things weren't going their way, and what I would give them credit for under Kovac is they do have more grit, they have more determination. They concede goals, yes, they concede silly goals, yes, but it doesn't seem to really sway them in the game itself. And this game is a perfect example of that, I think. Yeah, there's still individual mistakes. They've still got Nicolas Sula there, who can still cause problems. They've still got Benzebaini, who, I think is an important player for them because he's a great passer of the ball. He really dictates and orchestrates that defense really well. You can see Schlotterbeck really plays well when he's
Mm.
alongside him, but Benzebaini still has defensive hiccups in him. But to me, Manu, I think the biggest, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think maybe Dortmund's biggest defensive liability right now is actually Gregor Kobel in goals. And
Yeah.
he's always been a world-class shot stopper, but I just find myself more and more this season watching him make saves, and I feel like he's still making the saves, but he's not doing them confidently. Where a top-class goalkeeper would be catching that ball, he's parrying way too many of them. And maybe that wasn't maybe particularly a problem in this game, but it's
Mm.
definitely something I've noticed, and he dropped off a lot in the last kind of couple of seasons because at one point he was considered one of the best kind of up and coming goalkeepers in the world, and then he dropped off. He's still working his way back up there, I think, but in particularly those kind of parries from his shots, and it's something I noticed time and time again. It's a problem for Dortmund, and I think it definitely adds into what you said there, where they do still have these little hiccups defensively.